Since the creation of the sport of hockey, there's always been a massive obstacle when it comes to drawing interest to this amazing sport. Cost. But playing hockey isn't just expensive, no, it is considered the most expensive youth sport to play in the world. In fact, in 2015, Metro Kids launched a study looking at the cost of youth equipment in sports. Soccer or football coming in at $290, basketball $150, baseball $580, lacrosse, which is also considered an affluent sport, coming in at a whopping $612. However, sitting at the top with a very large margin sits ice hockey, coming in at an average cost of $962, 640% more expensive than basketball. Not to mention that lots of hockey equipment requires upkeep. Sharpening skates, don't even get me started on sticks. It's a traumatic experience. However, when it comes to costs in hockey, even though equipment cost is really expensive, it's not even the main issue. No, it's the infrastructure that creates the biggest barrier around the world. Yes, I can go out in a couple weeks and spend all my day playing on the ODR or outdoor rink if you're not Canadian, but unfortunately, not everyone can train like us Canadians. Thus, many places have to rely on hockey arenas, which are extremely costly, specifically in hotter climates. Which is why, when a player like Austin Matthews can somehow develop into a generational talent playing in the desert, even though they are still in America, it is definitely a great story. And this reliance on cold weather is why Canada has dominated the league since the inception of the NHL. In fact, a study by Elite Prospects was conducted in 2017, and the data they collected shows a fascinating story. In the 1980s, the NHL was made up of over 80% Canadians. And by the year 2000, that number dropped to 55%. And today, that number sits at 45%. A stark contrast. When you consider that before 8 out of every 10 players were Canadian, and today it's probably closer to 4 out of every 10. And with the significant decrease in Canadian blood, the NHL today is more diverse than ever, as countries like Sweden went from making up 3% of the league to around 12% today, meaning the number of Swedes has quadrupled. And this rise, this passion, has not only affected hockey countries, no, as we have seen elite talent developing in the most unlikely places. And this brings us to Aito Iguchi, because when it comes to skill in dominating the competition, Eguchi emerged as an elite prospect coming out of Japan. And when it comes to Japanese lineage in the NHL, out of the thousands and thousands of players to be a part of an NHL team system, there's only been one Japanese-born player in the NHL, which was Yutaka Fukafuji, a Japanese-born goalie who played 4 games for the Kings and a handful of games in the minors. So when Aito Iguchi popped up on many radars, mostly because of my guy Pavel Barber, go check him out, people were instantly intrigued. I mean, look at this. Disgusting. These clips were so nasty. Eguchi would become a social media star overnight, garnering lots of attention and media coverage, to the extent my man was seen as a prodigy. Because even though he was playing in a city that had one hockey arena for nearly 1.3 million people, for comparison, Calgary, Alberta has about 200 rinks for the same population, Aito would somehow keep developing and even get invited to a USHL camp. However, there was always a massive issue that held back Aito's immense talent. Size, because now at 18, Aito is reportedly sitting somewhere between 5'3" and 5'5". And when it comes to our current North American game, size has been a barrier that is almost impossible to get over. And even though Aito left a mark on the world and uplifted Japanese hockey, his NHL dreams may be over. However, Aito would also keep the door open for Yusaku Ando, because with more eyes on Japanese hockey, we would see players like Ando quickly rise. Because after lighting up his Japanese competition, Ando would come to Canada, who do really well in Quebec, and then go play for my hometown in Kelowna, BC. And playing on a AAA prep team, Ando would do exceptionally well, because as a 15-year-old, playing as an underager, Ando would put up 22 goals, 36 points in 20 games. He would even get called up to U18, where he would put up 3 points in 1 game as a triple underager. And this performance would earn Ando a spot on a USHL roster. 25 points in 40 games as a rookie, 23 points the next season. He would win gold in the Division II World Juniors, and Ando will be draft eligible in the 2023 NHL Draft. He still has some room to grow, but there is a good possibility that we see his name called at some point. A player like Ando will not have the same development curve as the typical North American prospect, as their training resources would have drastically changed when they got to North America, which has been shown in the past to create late growth spurts in development. Like, imagine being the best soccer player in a country where there are no soccer fields, and then you move to just say Mexico or America, and have access to all the greatest facilities in the world. You will most likely see huge growth later on in your career, but it is incredible to see elite talent coming from uncommon places like Japan. However, some international countries are and have been generating child prodigies for quite some time, because as it stands right now, we are witnessing one of the greatest Russian prospects in NHL history. And yes, I know, with some of the greatest talents coming from Russia, that is some high praise. But Matvei Mitchkov is no regular prospect. No, because as a 16-year-old, playing in the second best league in the world, a league even Alex Ovechkin heavily struggled in, Mitchkov has put up 5 points in his first 13 games. And some of you might be like, well, that's not that great. Ovechkin at the same age had 2 goals, 4 points in 22 games, meaning that Matvei is on pace to score more than double the points Ovi scored in his KHL rookie season. But it doesn't just stop there. Through 11 MHL games this season, Matvei has 17 goals and 28 points. I repeat, 17 goals, 28 points as a 16-year-old playing against some men in a low-scoring league. Alex Ovechkin had 18 goals, 26 points in 19 games at the same age. So if we're going to compare point-per-game averages, through 19 games, Matvei is on pace for 49 points and 29 goals, nearly doubling Ovechkin's production. Excuse me? Are you listening to what I'm saying? Ovechkin is arguably the greatest Russian player in hockey history, not to mention he's arguably the greatest goal scorer in NHL history, as he is still tearing up the league today and is on pace for his best NHL season at age 36. And Matvei Mitchkov not only surpassed Ovechkin's records, he obliterated his records. And I didn't even mention the fact that Matvei was on pace for breaking Ovi's U18 scoring record, as Matvei as a double underager would put up 12 goals, 16 points in 7 games. And it's not just Ovi who Mitchkov's surpassing. Malkin had 8 goals, 14 points in 28 Russia 3 games. With 28 games, Matvei would be on pace for 43 goals, 71 points. Or just 35 more goals than Malkin, a 2-time Art Ross winner, and a 1-time Hart and Ted Lindsay winner. And if you're somehow still doubting this dominance, let's take a look at Nikita Kucherov, as Kuch had a very respectable 54 points in 53 games. Keep in mind, Kucherov was also 1 year older than Matvei, and a lot of development happens in 1 year. However, in 53 games, Matvei would be on pace for 135 points, 82 goals. 82 goals! I literally cannot believe this. Not to mention he'd also pull off a lacrosse goal this season, as Mitchkov is just a pure goal scorer who has a scary toolset. Skating, hands, compete, and a generational scorer's touch. And it begs the question, with a draft resume like this, Matvei could arguably be one of the greatest prospects in the modern NHL era. Like, how can you even argue against these just unprecedented numbers? And it's even harder to believe that Matvei won't be the first overall pick in the 2023 NHL draft. Because keep in mind, he is still signed in the KHL until at least 2026. So sadly, we may not see him for a while. But I can safely say that Mitchkov is a player we can all get excited about. When we think of European hockey powerhouses, yes, we think of Russia, Sweden, Finland has been on fire in recent years. There's been another storyline slowly but surely brewing. Because back in 2011, we would see a player named Leon Draisaitl slowly make some headlines. Because playing in a U16 league as a 15-year-old, Draisaitl, and get this, would put up 193 points in just 29 games, breaking all kinds of records while catapulting himself to the NHL. As Leon would go second overall in the CHL import draft and have a dominant draft year with 105 points. And because of this, Draisatl would become the highest drafted German player in league history. And today is a top 5 player in the NHL, as he is also on pace for just a crazy 150 points. However, 10 years ago, there was next to no other German phenoms coming up in the system. This has drastically changed, because in just the past 3 drafts, we have seen two more German phenoms. In 2019, we had Moritz Seider, who was taken off the board at number 6, and would go on to winning SHL Defenseman of the Year in his rookie season. And this year, Seider has 16 points in 24 games, and will most likely be either the Calder winner or the runner-up to his teammate Lucas Raymond. But another German prodigy I wanted to analyze was Tim Stutzle, because in my opinion, Stutzle has really cemented Germany as a potential future hockey powerhouse. As a 14-year-old playing in a U16 league, Stutzle would put up an incredible 83 points in 32 games. As a 15-year-old playing U19, Stutzle would put up 47 points in 25 games, while also making most scouts in the world take note. Thus, Stutzle would be recruited by several top-tier NCAA teams, and he would commit to UNH. Because here's the thing, in the past, it was very difficult for German players to showcase themselves in German leagues. And this is why players like Draisatl felt the need to come to the CHL. And so, Stutzle, feeling the same pressure, would commit to the NCAA to develop in North America. However, after dominating a U20 league as a 17-year-old, Stutzle would make the shocking decision to stay in Germany, as he would take a massive risk playing in the DEL. I would say this situation is kind of similar to like Cam Makar, who would make the decision to play in the AJHL instead of the CHL, where he probably would have went first overall if he did that, but he didn't. And after a great season, putting up 34 points in 41 games as a 17-year-old playing against men and ex-NHL players, it wouldn't matter, as Stutzle would be drafted 3rd overall in the 2020 NHL draft, while at the same time setting a precedent that top players can in fact grow and develop at home in Germany. And today, Stutzle is the leading scorer from his draft class, and is helping lead the movement to expand German hockey programs. Because as it sits, and I am not joking, there is 6, I repeat, 6 active NHL players from Germany, half of them being Stutzle, Draisatl, and Seider. For comparison, Sweden has 87, and Canada 397.